Hello out there. Things are a little bit chaotic in here. Let me work on getting my stuff together. That's the wrong window. Aha. Ta-da. Hey, look, that's screwed up. Guess what? Everything's all screwed up and I don't mind. I'm here anyway. Hi there. So I'm going to see whether I can't maybe make this work. My window's not working right. So excuse me while I try to get that straightened out. Watch that. That's looking a little better. Wow. So, hi everybody. Welcome to the Airwindows Q&A live stream. Oh my god. Arg. Hi, Bo. So this might be a little ridiculous, but what the hey. I will do my level best with it. And oh hey, look at this. My light. My too bright light. Ah! It burns. No, it doesn't really burn. So, here we are. I'm actually thinking about taking these glasses or something because I do need to wear them to read anything and bending them so that these earpieces are like this, but then it'll be like, meh. And then I'll be wearing them kind of like that. And then I'll be able to read things or see things if they're up close, but it'll be more difficult for them to, or somewhat more difficult for them to do the terrible bright reflecting stuff like this. This is driving me too crazy. So, hello, folks. I have not been able to drink any of my coffee, so let me remedy some of that right now. Yay, one sip of coffee. I will try to function today is definitely more than a little bit chaotic for me. So a lot of stuff going on. And I'll try to keep up best I can. One of the things that's going on is I'm getting a replacement camera in to replace the sort of garbage webcam thing that I have up there. Julian, I don't know what to tell you. I'm using Steinberg's code for VST2s. If you can find anybody that tells me how to fix the VST2s so that they accept type values in Cubase, please tell me how to do that, and I'll do a massive update and update literally everything. As near as I can tell, Cubase is the only one having the problem, and Cubase handles the typing of values. My plugins have nowhere to draw a control. That's not part of what the plugin does. So I don't know what to tell you. Whoever the other user is, if they can confirm that Cubase doesn't let you do that, correct. There's other VST hosts that don't let you type in values too. If the other user is like, oh, other plugins should let you type in values for generic VSTs without a GUI, then somebody needs to tell me how to make that happen, because that's not part of my plugin. That's not part of anybody's plugin. So most people don't make these generic plugins. They're about 300K in size, and that's all there is to them. Let me try to drink coffee and get control of my life or the situation or anything. Oh, God. I wish I was able to give you better good spirit. I feel like that's not very good spirit because I'm just super frustrated and completely at a loss. Because as far as I can tell, there's like nothing I can do. Somebody explain why that is. I don't understand why that is. I'm using Cubase's code. I'm using Steinberg's code. If there's something I'm not doing right about the code, and it's open source code, then I don't know what to tell you. Steinberg might be trying to get everybody to use VST3s and kill all VST2s because they're trying to do that. I don't really trust them very much, but then as of late I'm having some challenges and stuff going on that's stressing me out and causing me to be more mistrustful of things. So I shouldn't jump to conclusions. I will say, however, that if anybody is able to locate what is wrong with the plugins, the VST2 generic plugins that's causing that to happen, that's something that I would fix for everything. But I'm using Steinberg's code for doing it, and other things operate that way. So it was difficult enough getting VSTs working at all. It took me years to get VSTs working at all, and I wasn't able to do it myself. Other people helped me do it. So I'm sure they're not going to tell me what to do. Goodness, no. Yeah, Jack, this live stream is the way to suggest plugin ideas, which isn't to say that I'll necessarily do them, but this is a place where you can suggest ideas, or indeed, if you were going to do them yourself, you could suggest ideas, and I would tell you how to do them and whether it was feasible or not. So this is the place for you to do that. I can probably make the judgment call on whether something will work or not on the fly, most likely. Yeah, the thing that is causing my stress is I have been able to do some studio building and there's stuff that I've got, some of which I can't show you right now because it's not in working order, but could lead to plugins modeling things in future. And among those things, I was trying to get a Eurorack module from a guy on Reverb. And I ran into a messy situation which drove me into the extent of my autism. And I ended up feeling very much like, wow, I successfully didn't get ripped off by somebody who did not have my best interests at heart and was actively trying to hurt me. And too much light. Oh, you're the one who's talking about phase perfect stems. I think I can look up something about that for you, but no, I am not liking the coldness of the light this morning. So what happened with the guy on Reverb that I was trying to get a Eurorack module from is here's the chain of events. I order a actually very cheap Eurorack module from this guy. It's this Blue Lantern thing. And I pay. And he goes, "Oh goodness, oh no, I can't find it. It's not there. Oh dear, well I'd better just refund you the money." And he refunds the money. And I go, okay, that's a drag. He's telling this sob story about a friend who was in a coma. And I'm like, oh dear, that sounds terrible. Okay, well, here, good luck. And yeah. And then it turns out, he turns around and goes, "Oh wait, it showed up. I found the thing." But he didn't relist it. And I follow up and go, kind of think of it, you got a couple of other things. Tell you what, why don't you relist that thing? And we can maybe talk about combining this with a couple of other things. So relist the thing on Reverb, and I'll buy several things from you. And he's like, oh, well, He keeps not relisting the one thing that I was specifically interested in. He's like, oh, I tell you what, we'll come up with something. Can we do this off of Reverb so I don't have to pay their fees? And I'm like, okay, this conversation is going on Reverb, which is like an eBay-like site for musical type stuff. If you're sure, how much for the three things then? And it's like, oh, okay, this much. I'm like, okay, PayPal me. And he's like, oh, but can you please send the money friends and family so I don't have to pay their crazy fees? That's when I bailed. I went, whoa. All of a sudden, this guy is doing a thing where I have no recourse if nothing ever happens, and he rips me off completely. And I go, yikes, okay, I'm out. I can't do that. I was not comfortable, and I wasn't looking for him in the first place to be like, oh, hey, let's do a thing off of the auction, the Reverb, so that you don't have to pay their fees. And then I realized, wait a minute, what he did at first could have been part of a scam, which would probably be very effective, which is have somebody buy a thing from you on the site that has buyer protections and stuff. Because the thing about what he was asking for getting paid through PayPal and a friends and family type thing is firstly fraudulent. It's making me a party to being fraudulent. And I would have no recourse if he just didn't send anything. And the entire chain of events culminating into oh, it's not paid a crazy fees, which just got my suspicions up, could have been intentional. Because what you could do is set up to have somebody buy a thing from you, and you have them do the transaction. You take the thing off of the listing site that you're using, and then you don't send it. You go, oh, I lost it. Oh, no. And you refund the money. And then the person that you're dealing with, their only experience with you is that they sent you money, which you then refunded. Then when you come back and go like, oh, hey, I found it after all. Can we do this transaction not on the website that you found me on? The person's like, well, they refunded my money. Sure. Why, you should have, I'll send it over again. And that's when you go for the like, oh, can we do it off of this site? Can we do it by PayPal? Oh, can we do it by PayPal friends and family so I don't have to pay all those fees? Because if you've already convinced them that you don't want to pay the fees of the sites that you're using. And then you follow it up with, I don't want to pay the fees that PayPal uses. And then you're all set up to just burn the guy ruthlessly. And they've walked along with it. And when I knew the guy was a scammer was when he was like, it was your idea to do the PayPal rather than on the site, when I specifically was like, can you relist this on the site? So that was just like yesterday. So I'm a little stressed as far as people being untrustworthy and screwing with me. And it puts me off balance, and that's not really my strong suit, is being in situations where I have to make those judgment calls. I would like to deal with people honestly. I would like to deal with people decently. And I'm not at my best when somebody's getting really adversarial that way. And I also was like, and now they have had a payment from me, and they know what my PayPal is, and they know what my account on Reverb is, and what if they like filed negative responses, and it was like, this guy screwed me over, and what would my recourse be? And so I had to play along, like, to keep the guy friendly, even though he had been trying to rip me off. And I was like, oh, hey, fam, not a problem. It's just my deal. I guess I'm paranoid or something like that. I'm not going to be able to get over this one. Sorry, swing and a miss. It didn't work out. And I kept having to make it like, oh, but I'm actually friendly with you, and I really don't think that's what it's like. And he was like, oh, you're acting like I can hurt you. And, well, you could say nasty things about me on this website. And such an unpleasant situation to be in. It's just, I'm not at my best in those scenarios. I'm just not. I'd rather be able to deal with people in a more straightforward kind of way and try to be trustworthy and have people be trustworthy. And sometimes that can't happen, so that's awkward. I feel like messing with my camera a little bit. What can we do? How's that? So I'm going to have a look at some of my questions here, because we started off on a bad foot as far as Steinberg demanding stuff of me that I don't think that I can do, because my code comes from the VSD2 template code. It comes from Steinberg. I don't know how to make it be any different. I'm using their template code. I don't know how to write anything else that's not part of the Steinberg template to make these things work in that way. So somebody else is going to have to figure out how that goes, because I'm not capable of it. It took me many years to even be able to do VSTs at all. I'm good at thinking of what goes inside the template and make stuff sound different. And I'm doing my best to keep bringing out new things like that, although some of them, like yesterday's, are trivial. Yesterday's was not sonically fancy in any way. It was just a different sort of mid-side thing than you might normally have. And that was by request. So questions I'm getting are from Jack. Phase perfect stems. But what you mean by that is multiple stems that play together don't go above zero. Aren't you talking about a limiter? Are you talking about having stems where the individual stems, and man, my field of vision is extremely distracting. I have multiple little copies of my face bouncing around. Let's try to do something else, like open a different window so I don't have to look at that. Do you mean stems where individual stems themselves go up exactly to 0? Like, I'll use my paper and pencil or pen, stuff that I've got. So supposing that's the waveform, and you got a waveform that is filling up the whole space, it's going up to 0. And then you have a different waveform that is also filling up the whole space and going up to 0. Do you mean having multiple stems, each of which go up to 0, and then when you combine them, it also goes up to 0? Yeah. And I am, the new PayPal for Friend scam because the old trick doesn't work anymore. The thing about it is that it kind of almost did. I walked right into that and could have gotten pretty screwed by it because I was, the fellow told me this sob story about having lost the thing that I bought from him, and his friends were like in the hospital and stuff, and he was in bad shape, and I felt badly for him because I naturally don't run around being harsh and suspicious of everybody. So, David Pixley picks the muzzle. I don't think there's a way to get 100% brick wall filter, period. The closest you can get is some offline rendering things. Like I'm using a Mac program called Brick that is a sample rate converter. And you'd be looking for something kind of like that. You'd be looking for something like a sample rate converter with a brick wall filter. And the closer you want to get, and also bear in mind, your 100%, that's a whole different issue. Like, do you mean 100% at the cutoff? Doing really great drawings today. You can do a filter where you have 100% rejection at the cutoff because it's not a very steep filter. Or you can do a filter where it's a cutoff, but it goes past the limit, and if that's sample rate conversion, you're going to get some aliasing as it cuts this stuff off. So that's going to be a little grungy, or it can be a little dull. Yeah, well, and I feel like I need to be corrected on pronunciation again. I feel like I'm not getting that right. I was asked to do that, but at that point I had already lost faith in the guy. I had become suspicious, and I wasn't willing to go forwards because I was like, on top of everything else, the immediate reaction of, no, hey, man, it was you who asked me to go off Reverb and be on PayPal in the first place when I literally asked the opposite, blew it for me. I was like, if you hadn't said that, it would have been more challenging. But trying to lay that on me when I was taking the opposite attitude from the beginning, I was not happy about that. So yeah, oh hey CG, and thank you for the thing about logical for and BitGlitter. I have a possible update for some compressors that involves something I'm going to be doing with DS, which is coming out pretty soon. Because DS is coming out with a update that has the steeper distinction between S and non-S. Like it doesn't incorporate any of the regular sound in, but it'll distinguish between S and non-S. And it has a sense circuit monitoring. So what you can do is use this new DS, turn it on to the sense monitoring, and then you're hearing only the S's and not the regular sound. So you can tell. The lighting is going to be all different all the time for a while, Ahmed, because I have major updates and changes going on. Right now it's because it's a rainy day out there, and I'm using this funky circle light thingy, and I have no other lighting anywhere. So it's like, yeah, here, check it out. Ah! It burns. The light, it burns. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to be working pretty hard on adjusting things, and I can probably get it so that it doesn't do the crazy autofocusing. Ow. Yeah, sorry about that. That's a bunch of work, but that's just a bunch of like the video end at the studio being upgraded, and it has me somewhat distracted, so I'll do my best as far as keeping up with things. We're about a half an hour in, and I don't feel I've answered very many questions very well. But I still want to pursue this one about the stems. So it's because when they render stems, birds are done for the year, I believe. So mixing person getting sent stems. If you imported the stems they received, it sounded like the rough mix the person had. Well, stems should. So I'm still figuring out what that means. When they render stems, mastering effects are being applied to the individual stem being rendered versus being applied to, well, if you're doing mastering, shouldn't you be able to apply stuff on the summed? I need more, Jack. I need more as far as this question is concerned. Because when you're talking about phase accurate stems, that's a whole other thing. Yeah, please keep elaborating on the stems, because I'm aware of something. I can't remember what the damn thing's called. There's a sort of an internet friend of mine of sorts, and by that I'm putting in caveats because it's bear with me. This is not one of my best days. Can't remember the man's name. Coffee. Give me more coffee. I'm desperately trying to hold it together today for this one. I don't know why it is that I'm just falling off my podcast this time, but not podcast. I'll be doing that in the next couple of days. And I'm thinking that the next one I'm going to do is Fly Like an Eagle, because I've had repeated requests from the same person for it. And it's like, if you want to hear this that badly, maybe you should. Maybe that's something I should do for you. I'm not sure whether Fly Like an Eagle fan, is it Ahmed, is here. But I feel like maybe that's something I need to include next. Coffee helped my brain function. So, Weedy Wet. Weedy Wet has been very fond of a particular plugin, and it is a phase adjustment plugin. And it is a phase adjustment plugin that you put on individual tracks to make sure that all of the individual tracks, starting out at the same instant, starting out at the same click, like it's reading the input somehow, hit in phase rather than out of phase. And this is a idea which in many ways I think is terrible, but Weedy really likes it. And that's what I thought you were talking about. So we have to talk more about what you actually mean, because what my understanding of what a phase synchronizing plugin. Let me do a little web searching. Phase synchronizing plugin. So here's a pile of different things. There's a plugin called Auto Align from SoundRadix. It might be the one Weedy is fond of. Weedy is William Whitman, who plays with Cyndi Lauper and engineered her biggest hit album. He's very cool. He's another very opinionated person, and I honestly can take that as a bit of a role model. Because this is a guy if I've talked about like, oh, I so want a Rickenbacker bass, I'd put round ones on it and set it up like I was Chris Squire. And he'd be like, wrong answer. No, you shouldn't, don't. And I'd be like, but I know what I want to do, and this is what I want to do. And he'll be like, flat ones. You must put flat ones on the Rickenbacker if you have one. And then he recorded a little thing from a Beatles track using his Rickenbacker bass with flat wounds on it. And sure enough, it sounded absolutely wonderful. And the Rickenbacker with flat wounds is also what you'll hear on some Genesis albums. And there's actually quite a lot out there that is using that sound. It's just not the clangy Chris Squire Rick through a Marshall stack kind of thing. So Weedy is somebody that I know as he'll have strong opinions about stuff and then not be shy about communicating. Let me see if I can fiddle with the lighting a little bit better. Maybe I can make it be less weird. But so this might be excessively bright. I don't have all my lights going on, but as long as I don't lean in too much, it'd probably still be okay. And there's a Eventide called Precision Time Align, and there is a Universal Audio plugin called Little Labs IBP. And those are also phase alignment plugins. I feel as if they also have a conceptual drawback as far as how that works, in that I don't think it's the correct answer. But apparently that's not what you mean, which is good, because that's not something that I'll be able to do, because that seems to involve reading information from a bunch of different plugins and having them mysteriously talk to each other, and my setup doesn't use that. My setup uses individual plugins that aren't stepping outside of their zone or trying to talk to anybody else or each other. And I mean, since I am using Macs, I'm also looking at a situation where the gatekeeper stuff gets increasingly fussy about anything being done like that. Like if you have plugins that save things to the hard drive, some of those are guaranteed to have problems upcoming with future stuff coming out, because Apple's gatekeeper stuff will fight you. Or if you're doing locking up plugins with software, digital rights management, DRM, if you're doing DRM, Apple stuff is probably going to fight you on that, because you're going to be trying to tap into the user's computer in deep and sophisticated ways that they can't easily defeat. And I think people should be trying to resist that kind of behavior. So I'm all for Apple's kind of stuff, but it means that my plugins need to not be messing with users' computers. My plugins need to just have that going on. They'll do their audio thing and then get out of the way. They won't try to make any files on your computer. They won't try to do anything sophisticated or communicate. So I'm getting a little more from Jack as far as what this idea is about. But this ring thing is actually being set impossibly dim. Like it is on the lowest brightness setting because the rest of my lighting can't keep up with it. So I could set it up so that it was forcing the camera to adapt to its brightness. And then if I pull back a little bit, I'll be completely buried in dimness. And then if I move forwards, it'll be way brighter. But my surrounding lights are completely dim at the moment. So I don't have lots of other bright lights going on. I don't have the full video kind of thing. That's one of the things I need to try to work on as far as enhancing like the studio stuff and getting videos done better. This morning, that is not an action. This morning, we have, in fact, tell you what, we're going back to the really chilled out, like candlelight style mode and just hanging out, talking about stuff, because that's legit too in its way. I am going to try to keep following what Jack is talking about because I begin to understand. Yeah. So if your test mixes are being done with an intense compressor on the master and you're sending people stems, anything you send people in stem, this becomes a workflow thing, and I hope that I can help you with it, but and maybe there's a plugin idea in here somewhere, but I'm kind of suspecting not so much. So here's the deal. Maybe I can draw more pictures. It always helps. But I'll talk first, and then we'll see whether I have pictures that I need to draw. If you're doing heavy master bus compressing or limiting or anything like that, and you're trying to send off stems, by definition, in sending stems, you are defeating everything that is on the master and forcing the person to replicate what you had. So, firstly, if you need to get an effect on that, and I do have some advice for you as far as what might help you get more into the zone. It won't really be in terms of making a special plugin that can predict what's going to happen. But here's the thing. If you're working with these stems, you're dependent upon having the mastering person run the same kind of dynamics processing. So what you can do is tell them exactly what you've got and have them replicate exactly what you did. Now, with my plugins, that can be more of a problem because they are prone to be like, 0 to 1 settings. They're meant to be done by ear. So they're not nearly as much like this is exactly a 4 to 1 ratio and it kicks in at exactly minus 18 dB and so on. Like my stuff doesn't tend to work that way. I don't really want it to work that way, but it's a problem in this circumstance. Because in order to be able to predict what's going to happen, you must have the mastering person do exactly what you did, which kind of defeats the purpose of sending them stems. Honestly, if it's like that, I would be not sending them stems. I would be sending them, and you don't have to send mastering people stems. It's entirely possible to send mastering people 2 channels and have that be basically in the ballpark because they are not really there for doing things real differently so much as they're another pair of ears. They are there for fussing with EQ concerns, They're for shaping the whole thing slightly. And once you're working with, like, stems shouldn't be a assumption in mastering. That is what they call orthogonal to the purpose of having them be another set of ears and a way of doing sort of global manipulations on the overall track that are really transparent and sound good and don't degrade anything. Back in the day, I had done a little bit of mastering for people and didn't always do that latter very well. Sometimes I was doing stuff that was more mixing style processing. Yeah, the Joku Sekofan, the floating point thingy is pretty optimized. It's been optimized for a bunch of months now. Anything that is relatively recent is optimized. Anything that was not is kind of still in process. I got buried under a bunch of other kinds of work and stuff, but that is still out there. At some point I will pursue it, and then I'll knock my website off a line again by going, oh, hey, I've updated everything. If it turns out to be that there is actually something that Steinberg doesn't see fit to tell me about using their own code to make their own plugins for their own DAW in such a way that it can give them typable in entry fields in their own DAW with the own controls that they themselves made, then I would have another update everything kind of thing, and then everything would come along. But I want to go back to Jack. I don't feel that I've satisfactorily answered Jack. So when the compressor is working on drums and synth and bass all together, what happens there is you're completely dependent upon having the mastering engineer use exactly the same dynamics process that you are, or trusting what they do with it. Because at that point, they're mixing themselves. Everything that they do is going to affect the combination of things. And there is an exception, and I'll tell you what it is. Because this might be the only real solution you have with it. And that is, you might need to do a certain amount of preliminary... it really depends. I keep wanting to draw something, and I don't know how. I don't know how to render this in pictures. Coffee, arg, must be able to think. Can't think today. Honestly, after last week, I think I was much more cheerful and chipper on my live chat because although I was still basically feeling kind of sick, I just feel completely flattened by some of this stuff today. I can't keep up, but I don't give up, so I'm going to keep trying. I can't drink too much coffee either because that's bad for me. He says as he drinks all the coffee. It depends upon how your stems are affecting each other. Like, let's say you've got a bass and you need the bass to duck and get out of the way of the drums. So you have the drums with a really big percussive spike. And those push the bus compression out of the way. We're talking the mastering bus compression out of the way. So you expect that your final output is going to make the compression on the... some of this stuff you could be doing with DAW style stuff. Like if you need something to push another thing out of the way, rather than having that entirely happen on the bus, what you could do is put a compressor on the bass, assuming that's the one that you want to squish out of the way, and then sidechain in, which means you can't be using mine. You have to use something like DAW compressors and learn how to use the sidechain, and sidechain in from the kick drum and have it forcibly push the thing out of the way. And then if you're mixing stems, it should still be listening to the source track, even though you're not including that in the final mix, because you have a separate connection between the compression of the one thing and a different irrelevant track that's going to make the thing do what it does. But you can't be doing that from just having everything hit the bus and then make stems and have that still be doing it. And the trick of being able to work that around that to some extent, assuming you need everything to be relatively balanced, is you need to be compressing stuff partly independently. And that's assuming that you don't need to have anything really kicking other things out of the way. Let me keep scanning up and down and trying to keep on top of all of this somehow. Yeah, you are talking about the bass and the way the bass ducks while the drums are playing. So that sounds like what I'm talking about. There is no special way. What you're looking at is not really about stems versus mastering at all. You're really talking about sidechaining things. That's what you're really trying to do. Because once you're on the master bus, your overall result is going to be kind of like that, but what you're trying to make happen is like sidechaining. And not just hitting the bus with various stuff. And again, I'll draw some. I'm going to use this other piece of paper because my pictures are that bad today that it's not going to even help. Let's say that you needed to make a sidechain compression squish like this. You're expecting it to be like, okay, and when stuff gets too loud, the volume level just goes down. It's a really arbitrary picture. So what you could do is have the master bus be a much more gentle compression. It's going down, I know. Maybe I'll flip it over so that it's like, okay, this is your slope, and this is like an 8-to-1 or something like that. That's on your bus. And what you can do is have your bus be just like a 2-to-1 or something like that. It's a much lower ratio. And then you also have the individual track being like a 2-to-1 as well. And that is not going to make it act sidechainy, but I'll tell you what it will do is if you do this, if instead of using a steep ratio compression on your master bus and then hoping that the mastering engineer is going to replicate that, instead assume the mastering engineer is going to use a lower ratio compressor, if at all. And you can be like, this master bus needs to have some compression. That's what my test mix is like. But also have the stems running a low ratio compression because compression multiplies by itself. So if you have some on the stem and some on the master bus, they will combine together to reproduce this. You'll be able to reproduce the effect that you were getting even though the mastering person is apparently not even coming close to reproducing exactly what you've got on the bus that you're working with, which becomes really the problem because that's also like if they're not reproducing what your master bus needs to do, either you need to not be sending them stems or you need to be telling them what they would have to do in order to reproduce what you need. That's really the bottom line. I can't make plugins to fix that problem because the mastering guy has to be able to reproduce what your dynamics were supposed to do in the first place. And as near as I can tell, there is no other solution other than work with the person and come up with... Also, I'm not sure how you would have them using a plugin of mine and telling them what they need to put on their mastering bus just to be able to it, unless... I'm still trying to figure out what you're talking about. So you want a plugin from me that you put on your own mastering bus that is going to do something so that you're more in control of what somebody else's mastering bus is doing without my plugins there. That is presumably, because this is just confusing me terribly, and I wish I could be doing better for you as far as figuring out what this means. I'm really not doing well today here. That said, I have good plugins coming out in the next couple of weeks, so it's fine. I can be not doing well today, and that is basically fine. Anytime people talk about plugins that talk to each other, you start losing me. I start freaking out and being like, that's bad. It's just bad. Render stems as if all the stems are feeding into the mastering processing chain. My. Depends so much on what you need to be able to answer for me what the mastering processing chain is going to do. If you're using exactly the same dynamics that the mastering guy is using, then it'll come out the same way. You won't need my help with that. If the mastering person is using completely different things on dynamics than you are, that's a problem, and it's going to continue to be a problem no matter what you do. It sounds like you're talking about a way of trying to bake in, and this is what I'm telling you as far as using different ratios. Like if you're expecting a steep ratio on the 2 bus, and you figure that the mastering person is going to be giving you a much shallower ratio, and you need to understand what these things mean, then you can replicate that to some extent without a 2-stage plugin that talks to each other, by also putting a compression on your stem and or on your actual individual tracks, but probably we're talking about your stem, because 2 shallow compressions add up to 1 steeper compression, and that'll give you back the thing that you wanted. But you would need to stop using the steep ratio compression on the bus and use the shallower compression on the bus yourself, at which point it would be acting the same as the mastering person had, at which point you would no longer be having that problem. It sounds like this is a problem that shouldn't be happening, and this needs to be fixed at its root source rather than me making a plugin to work around it somehow. And I feel like it's important. Sometimes there are things that need to not be fixed by like digital trickery. Not that I'm that good at digital trickery, and I try to be good at digital sort of sonic purity or whatever. The muzzle would like a mid-side encode-decode things. Don't I already have that? Doesn't Edisdim do that? Edisdim converts stereo into mid in one channel and side in the other. And then mid-side converts back. So I already have made that plugin. As far as the amplitude is concerned, I think that's different, but I found it very tricky to use. And I'm not sure if people naturally find it easy to do. But look into Edisdim. That is probably what you're asking for already. I think that already works. You might need to use gain trims. It does already have gain trims built into it. But yeah. PayPal for frauds is the next big thing. Well, you know, one of the things about live streaming is sometimes when you're having a complete meltdown, it makes for better video. So this is just going to be one of those things, you know, we'll see. My hair, what there is of it, is all screwed up from me ripping the headphones off and going, gah! And that's just how that goes. Let me see how far back I have fallen. I like Joku, the volume envelopes instead of compressor. That is a pro tip there. That is something that Deadmau5 is very expert in doing. you'll have stuff where it's like, oh man, listen to that intense compression sidechaining, when it's actually not. Instead, he's using an LFO. And the LFO is hitting one of his synthesizers or whatever and going hit, 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 hit every beat. And it's totally a smart thing to do in certain genres and definitely worth fooling with. But yeah, people assume that you need to use compressors for that. You don't. You can build automation or LFOs into it. I'd love to come up with a plugin, either VST or AU, that was better at like telling where you are in the bar, that had more of a synchronization with the host, because I have no idea how to do any of that stuff. If I knew how to do it, I'd be doing more with it. Every time I get into this thing about like, oh, here's all you do. You have the plugins talk to each other, and then they talk to the DAW, and they tell you whether or not this person has another brand of plugin installed on their computer, and what time of day it is, and where we are in the track versus the beginning versus end of the track, and where you are in the bar, as in, are you... And I don't know how to get access to any of that stuff. I couldn't even tell you what the tempo is from... I can tell you what the sample rate is. I know what that is, but I couldn't tell you what the tempo is from inside the plugin. So, bleh. Scanning forwards, keeping track. I'm not sure that Flora is a better version than MaxBase, but it's trying to do a similar kind of thing. Ahmed, there are indeed Airwindows transient shapers. Go and check out Point. Airwindows Point. It's out. It is free. It's in your collection, because if you downloaded new updates, those 179 plugins or whatever, that's one of them. And that's one of the reasons why I need to get more curated collections, because you wouldn't necessarily know among all the different ones that you might not want that, like, oh, the transient shaper, that might be Point, and you'd be able to fool with it. Point is the transient shaper that you want to fool with. It's maybe not the easiest thing to do. There might be the capacity for making another one that's a little bit more built in, like that specifies certain kinds of behaviors and just is optimized for those. Because Point is one of those Airwindows chainsaws that you can set it to be really aggressive and do really screwy things. And it might take some sophistication to learn how to set it right, which is when it becomes relevant to start doing, in fact, that's worth making a note of, because I can probably come up with dedicated plugins like that. But Point can be set to bring additional transient sparkle at a wide range of frequencies. Like you can have it bring more, point and edge to high frequency transients. And you can also use it to suck out transients. Like you can use it to do complete compression inversion on a snare and make it into basically cannon fire going off. Because you can use Point to smush transients off as well as build them up, and that's one of the things that you can do. However, it is definitely a bit of a power tool, and you can get yourself in trouble, at least in terms of distorting your mix bus, by using it and setting it wrongly. So it might be worth making something that's a little more like select several options and have a more limited range of adjustment that only does what you thought it was going to do. Heavy bus compression, yep. Buttercomp is a weird choice for bus compression, especially if you're looking for pumping, because it simply won't do it. It's almost more like an automatic gain control. Very subtle, that one. And Pop is much more capable of doing that, but is much less like neither of those really go for the pumping and breathing kind of thing. What Pop does is hypes up attack transients hugely. It's designed to do that sort of Phil Collins effect, where it's wildly super compressed, and then all of the little dynamic details jump out. If I ever get a chance to buy that literal Allen and Heath compressor that Collins used on his super compressed 80s vocal stuff, because he was using a ribbon microphone, and this is kind of stuff that I talk about in Evergreens. But so if I do the a Genesis album like that on Evergreens, I'll be talking about this at length. But he was using a ribbon microphone into a particular Allen and Heath like mini limiter kind of thing, which isn't even a rack mount device. It's just this little box. It's almost for sports announcers or something. And that was his vocal chain. And it used lots of compression and was extremely punchy and aggressive and kind of weird, and worked a treat. It worked super well. That's what pop is meant to try to do. So you can certainly get the full range of compressy activities and different things to bring out or push back by combining Buttercomp with pop, but I wouldn't say either of them are that much at being able to do like bus pumping and squeezing. I agree with David that Buttercomp and pop are a very cool bus compressor combo, but they don't necessarily do all of those things. Instead, that is for just getting a wide range of possible behaviors out of it that aren't necessarily just recognizable hardware compressor pumping and breathing kind of thing. It's an interesting comment from Jack about trying to avoid spending a bunch of time reproducing the master bus processing some. The trouble is, if you're sending stems out to a mastering engineer who's expected to do stuff, you must reproduce what they're doing in order to get consistent results. That or don't send them stems. There's no other answer. If your mastering person is using stems and using obvious compression, then you must reproduce that or you have no control over your output. That's why I keep saying, like, in some of these cases, you need to not be giving them stems, because if what you're doing on the 2-bus is that important, they need to be working with that rather than throwing it away and doing something of their own. I'm not sure how feasible that is. Maybe you're in a situation where you're working with big-name mastering engineers who expect to be able to, I guess, do their own thing. So you feel like your hands are tied and you're compelled to work with them. In that case, what I would do is find out from them, what are they going to be doing? Like, what is the 2-bus compression that they're going to be applying, so that you can get something that is going to be relatively predictable. And the rest of it is like this thing of, if they have steep compression, then you need to be compressing your stems a little bit just to have it be more controllable. Fresh cup of coffee for my soul. I'll make a fresh cup of coffee in about an hour when I'm finished, because today could very well be the day where I bring in a camera that's better than the Logitech webcam I've been using all this time, and then spend all afternoon setting it up. I have the nifty light, the circle light and stuff, and we're working on all that kind of stuff. But if I get a functioning new camera that I can use with all that, that's going to be a whole big pile of work. You might even see it, if it works, you might even see it as early as tomorrow when I do the Airwindows Livestream, the music stream. But no more coffee for me right now, though. So it was just earlier saying, render stems with your plugins on them and make them download it, huh? Ahmed, I make my living on the internet. There's no such thing as a break for a day. But then at this, well, it's a little complicated. Like there are going to be weeks and months that are not quite as high stress as what the last few weeks have been. There's stuff going on behind the scenes that you wouldn't know about. I will note that one of the things that's been going on over the last couple of years is the aftermath of like my mom and dad passing away a couple of years ago. There's been stuff that I've been obliged to deal with as far as that's concerned. And I don't always tell you everything that's going on. Like, around the same time period, my old cat passed away. And I didn't make an elaborate, like, plug-in video thing about that. She just stopped showing up in the videos, and that was why. So I don't always fill you in on all the stuff that might be going on in my personal life. And there are, like, one of the things that's been going on in my personal life at the moment is that as far as that family stuff is going, I'm starting, like I said, to get into a zone where I can throw more of what I get off of the Patreon back into my studio. And I heartily encourage doing this. It does kind of get in the way of you being able to take a break for a day. But it's also exciting because I'm doing the stuff that I love and care about. So if there's a situation of like, okay, here's my Roland M16E mixer, and I'm doing my music recording through that, but then it becomes possible for me to get something that is better as a mixer. It wouldn't be entering into the plugin videos because it's not plugin stuff. And it would be a bunch of work. And getting a new thing in, setting it up, getting used to it, and learning to use it. It would also be delightful, but it would also be stressful. So when there's a lot of that stuff going on, that's how it be. And sometimes I'll be able to make other videos explaining that. Like a long time ago, I did a video on how to use a guitar synthesizer and run it into the Behringer Moog Model D copy. And it turns out that was a terrible choice because the Behringer is one of the least good sounding things for that particular guitar synthesizer. But I've worked out a series of things where I have a much better guitar synthesizer sound, like insanely better, and that might be worth a video at some point. It's not quite like, hey, if you have like whatever, $600 or something, $300, however much the Behringer is, use this for your guitar synth. It might be more along the lines of like, if you could get a couple of actual Moog things together, these are the ones you should pick. And they're actually among the cheaper ones you could get, and you could get them one at a time. And once you've accumulated this particular exact pile of stuff, here's how you combine it to do this amazing, miraculous thing. Because that's one of the things. It's like some of the stuff that I've been doing lately, I was able to get. You can probably see there. It's one of the cheapest Moogs you can get, but it's real. It is a sub-fatty. And I am a super huge sub-fatty advocate at this point because it is exactly what I need for the guitar synth stuff. It is also very good it's designed for like, this is the one that does basses. And it's a little less sharp than some of the other ones. But that just makes it more suitable for the guitar lead style stuff. And you combine a Mother 32, which is the sort of semi-modular thing that they have, with it, and all the most amazing things become possible. But you have to know how to do it, and you have to know how to set it up. So a video of like, do this and this and this and this and this and this and this, and here's the result. Wow. That's the sort of thing I might be doing. Let me keep following because I'm falling so far behind. There is no pause. It's already 12:11. I have 50 minutes or so, 50 minutes or so, remaining of live streaming, and I'm going to keep chasing along so that I can answer actual questions, because this is mostly about answering questions. You can see that in the live stream. It says in the bottom of the thing, Airwindows Monday live Q&A stream. And I mean that quite seriously, so let's keep going. Yeah. David, the idea of the encode decode system that allows sidechaining to whatever plugins you stick between, you probably need to get heavy into VCV Rack. That's another one of the things, is I'm looking to finally upgrade my computer, which has been stuck in the same one for a bunch of years now. And I've decided to get a 2018 Mac Mini of a particular kind. Like, I'm getting one, I'm going to get as much internal SSD space as I can, because you can't put that in with outside parts. But I'm also getting absolutely minimum RAM on the thing, because I'm going to OWC and getting RAM from them, which is like a third of the price of what you get it from Apple. So I'm assembling a Mac Mini of the gods. And the thing about that is I'll probably be able to actually run non-trivial stuff in VCV Rack and stream it. And if I can do that, because the thing about it is, like, I'm on a Mac, and I feel like Mac is not the strongest performer for VCV Rack. I think you could probably, like, PC gamers using gamer PCs who've done all, like, their overclocking and water cooling and stuff like that, and they're getting insanely high frame rates in whatever games that they're using. Those guys are probably all set to run really elaborate, sophisticated things in VCV Rack, which you can't necessarily do if you're just, like, first generation Retina screen iMac, which is what I've got. And as they say, it's a laptop on a stick. I believe I would be having problems running anything that's non-trivial in VCV Rack, so it's been a complete non-starter for me. Like, I haven't been coding for VCV Rack either, because I can't use it in any sophisticated way, because it's just not, it'll choke and die. And one of the reasons for that is that VCV Rack can't run buffers. It's as if you would set your latency in the DAW to, like, one sample. So you can only do about 2 tracks, and that's it, because it's trying to do every calculation for every single sample. Rather than in buffers, it's doing it just one at a time and then moving on to the next track, and that's way less efficient. So, but VCV Rack must do that because everything is interconnected. So basically what you'd be doing is get into that and watch for me getting more into that so that I can benefit it as well. And that's the kind of thing where you're patching stuff to other stuff. Ahmed. Ahmed is being very sweet about, like, Chris needs a break. Well, bear in mind, part of my stress level is that I have a heavy work day ahead today. Assuming that everything goes correctly as far as me getting my replacement camera in, I then need to set it up and do the whole studio over again with a new assortment of gear, and I have no idea what I'm in for as far as dealing with that. So sometimes I have preemptive stress, which I think is not that unusual. I'm unusually subject to it. Like, if stuff is going to be happening later in the day that is going to be an absolute bear, then the entire day previously to that, I'm just going to be a bit of a wreck, because I know what I'm in for later on. And I'm game, I'm braced for it. The results could be amazing, we'll see. But I also feel like, yeah, I've gone to the trouble of doing all of this stuff, and I'm using, like, Patreon money in order to upgrade the thing, so I gotta do it right. I gotta do it so well. And that is self-imposed stress, really. That's kind of how I got to be Chris from Airwindows, and why I am the way that I am, is that I respond to that kind of self-imposed stress. But yeah. So, David, if you can find out how to take in audio sidechains on audio units in VST, I'd be super excited to hear about it. I have yet to. Oh, Joku picks the Muzzle 3 is the U-Lock guy. I'd love to do that. I don't know how. I don't know how to take in an audio sidechain. Audio units are able to do it. I don't know how to set it up. I think VSD2s are able to do it, although I'm not sure that they work for everything. So it'd be another one of those things where, oh yeah, this doesn't work in this. And I'm like, sorry. Because so much of this stuff I'm at the mercy of how the developers implement things. And the first thing they're going to want to do is blame the plugin person for not being able to do a thing. But anytime you're taking a format and doing something unexpected with it, it's a world of hurt. And I just got to walk into that and accept it. And be like, I'm going to do this thing, and it only works in Reaper, or it only works in Cubase, or whatever. And then just try to communicate that part. That is the lot of the plugin developer. Ah, Jack, good point. Same thing. If you have saturation on the master, that's going to act, especially if we're talking like soft saturation, that's going to act like the compression. If you need to color individual stems, you need to put even softer saturation on the stems. And then that'll take over to some extent from what's happening on the master. And think of it like this, like how much do you need everything to gel from summing in the master? Would you be able to do everything by compressing and saturating it all at stem level and summing them together basically in just a DAW? Like if the mastering person either just had a DAW or maybe they have some kind of outboard hardware summing that is so incredibly pristine. Like there are Neve desks like this. The 9098i from Neve is a multi-million-dollar desk that is so clean that people complain about it being too sterile and sounding too much like a DAW because it is that free of summing grunge and all of that kind of stuff. To what extent can you get where you need to get by using only compression, saturation, and stuff on the stems and having none of it on the actual master on the 2-bus? Can you strip all of your stuff away from the 2-bus and get the sound that you need? Because the thing is, if you can't do that, you're completely subject to having the mastering person do what you need them to do. Or don't give them stems. And it could go either way. Like there are ways of dealing with that. And oh, that's interesting. David's not the Pix. Okay. In that case, if you're not David Pixley, then I'm not sure who is there. But the muzzle is, I thought, David. In any case, that really is the question right there, is to what extent can you strip that stuff off of the 2-bus and leaving it as just only ultra clean summing? And that is about the size of it. But you're absolutely right that if you're doing something like that and the 2-bus is saturating and you render individual stems, you'd need to have the mastering engineer replicate the saturation exactly the way you had it as well. And again, it gets back to this, like, you need to either not be giving them stems or have them do what you need. There's literally no way around it. If they're doing something that's very different, then they're remixing you. And either you're happy with that or you're not. But there is like nothing that should be done in plugin world that would be able to go, okay, here's where this is pushing the bass into distortion on the master because the levels were thus and so. And therefore, I put this degree of distortion into the bass where it was happening on my master so that when they sum it together, the bass is clipping on the mastering engineer's stems mix the same way that I had. It's like either you got to build that into the original tracks by themselves without referencing stuff on the happening on the master stage. There's no way to pick that out. You cannot take the master and go like, oh, here's where the bass is clipping. Instead, it's like, yeah, this is the overall master clipping at this point. You can't assign it to any given particular thing. It just feels like most of what we're talking about here is communicating with your mastering engineer and working in synchronization with them, or not giving them the opportunity to do things that differently from you. And you're absolutely right that Daft Punk is a good example of doing the master chain bus and getting stuff out of it, like saturating it or whatever, because Daft Punk were famously using like cheap little Mackie mixers and stuff that were just tiny and slamming them because they had a particular coloration to the sound when you slammed them. That is totes legit. But if you're expecting that to happen on your bus, you have to supply it. You can't have the mastering engineer is not necessarily even going to think of doing that, nor is it necessarily what they should be doing. Like, if I was doing mastering for people and I threw that in on a master that people weren't expecting it, they'd rightfully freak out. In fact, that kind of stuff has happened. I've done mastering many, many years ago for people who were expecting a certain thing, and I got a little experimental with it. And I was like, here is a thing which makes it sound as if the whole thing has a bit more in the way of bass bends, and they're kind of rumbly, and there's an overtone in there that'll help the bass be more distinguished. And I have never gotten so much hate off of, I had that track ripped away from me and done by somebody else because it was treated as a major disaster that was entirely my fault. So you can't do that kind of thing if you're in mastering. And if you're needing it to happen, that's why it ain't happening. I'm going to try to keep catching up. More questions. There is Surge and Surge Tide, but those are not really about pumping. And there's another plugin that now I don't remember what it is, but I bet I can find out. I bet I can look into the compression subcategory in Airwindows and tell you what it was. So I'll try to do that now. Compressors Plus. It would also be an Innovative, but I have a lot in Innovative now. So there's Podcast, and there's Curve, and Recurve. Block Party, Pure Squish, Buttercomp. Buttercomp again. Swell might be what you're thinking of. It's the one where it's designed to be kind of like a attack, where if it goes quiet, it sort of gates you, and then as sound comes in again, it doesn't switch on immediately. Instead, there is a attack speed between silence and having sound come out. So the one that you're thinking of, the compressor from Airwindows that made a wompy or pumping, is not even a compressor. Swell is not actually a compressor, but you can put it on individual tracks and it'll soften attacks hugely. It'll like take attacks of things away completely if you want them and make them be as and the splitting transient and legato sound to process only the transients is a very interesting question that I think people have brought up before. And it feels almost like that would need to be a plugin that you would have on distinct tracks and set it to either one polarity or the other. And then you need to be able to sum them together again, which might not happen cleanly, but you'd need to be splitting the track you're working on into two tracks and having both of them run the same plugin but in opposite modes. So the transient splitting is something I have not forgotten about, but it would need to be more sophisticated than going like, yeah, use point twice with the same settings and have one of them split so that you're subtracting dry from it. In fact, that would be a good candidate for one of the things I've been talking about, which is using that, and I don't remember the name of how that thing is said, using the thing that I'm doing with the new DS. With the new DS, you get to listen to only the S's rather than removing the S's. And that's fairly easy to do, and I can do that with compressors, and I could do that with point. So if you had that in point, you'd be able to set it to that, and then use the combination of points and settings to do that. It wouldn't be a dedicated plugin, but it would be a way of using the plugin where it would do it. So transient splitter is my note for myself from today. And it sounds like point would be your thing as far as that. So again, we're back to point. Sounds like point is something that I need to be paying attention to. I need to make point easier. I need to make it more presettable so that you can get various things out of it more predictably rather than having to be challenging in that way. And yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, is playing back just the added or indeed subtracted sounds from the effect. And that's exactly what we're talking about. Seems like it could be done. Seems like that could be done. Joku, the bit reducer thing. That's actually exactly what ULaw is made to do. ULaw is dedicated initially to the fact that if you put a bit crusher in there, you get a particular flavor of old school digital that is very desirable. And you can crush the sound quality down enormously. But if you're using ULaw, what you're getting is more bits to represent subtle sounds. And then as stuff gets louder, it starts getting more coarsely spaced. So you wind up with a very striking old school digital sound that's pretty darn desirable. And you also have to push the bit crush way farther than you would normally do. Yeah. ULaw is all about using bit crushers in there. And rather than being a weird idea, it is dead center what it's best at. Like ULaw is best at putting a bit crusher in there and then modifying that. It sounds awesome. It's definitely worth doing. Yeah, I'm trying to catch up, and boy, man, how far down do I need to go? Oh my God. Okay. I'm going to try to catch up. I got a half an hour. Dum. Picks. I can't raise the circle light. It has to be in the place that it is. That's the whole point of what it is. So I might have to lose the clock. I'll be figuring out something to do with the glasses. If indeed I keep wearing them, it makes it easier for me to make notes and stuff if I'm writing something. I do need to use glasses for seeing stuff close up. I'll be working on this visual stuff. That's one of the reasons I'm so stressed out, is I got a camera coming in and I'm going to be evolving the visual thing and figuring out what I need to do in order to get it like up and working. I've had the current setup for a bunch of years, and it's made out of all this garbage equipment of various kinds. So people have gotten used to it. And now I'm trying to do better. And I need to learn real fast as far as what the real YouTubers do. It has me wondering, because I keep wondering, like, do you get into a situation where you're a YouTuber, you've got like, oh, almost 3,000 people, and YouTube is going like, do we promote this person or not? Is there ever somebody that goes and looks at it and goes, wow, it looks like he's using a Logitech webcam. Don't give this guy any promotion. He's not ready. He doesn't have his shit together. Versus like, oh, he clearly has good cameras and there must be like money behind this fellow, so let's give him more promotion. Is it ever something like that? Is it something like people randomly see your stream and they're like, oh, that looks like trash, and then they switch it off immediately because it's like, yeah, that's a cheap webcam. I don't know. I mean, there may be an aspect of that. Certainly the people that I see most heavily promoted and are doing the most on YouTube, their production values are slick as anything. And I can't really fake that, although I have done the best that I could with the limited resources that I have. But there's much to learn. And yeah, I got a Subfetti. It's one of the cheaper Moog synthesizers, but there's going to be a video at some point about, like, here's how you set up a Subfetti and a Mother 32 to give the Tommy Mars Frank Zappa lead line sound. Because, yeah, I figured that out, and I'm super happy with it. It even shows up in last week's live stream, and it'll be showing up again in this week's live stream. That particular patch, you need to have the two instruments to do it with. And yeah, I'm pretty much agreed it's going to be Fly Like an Eagle for the Evergreen, because somebody was kept asking me about it, and part of it was like, do I have to? I don't really want to do that one. But there's things to be learned about it, and I know there's stuff that I can look up and figure out. I'll tell you what kind of synthesizer that is and the lead-in. I'll tell you how to do the echo effects that they're using and how that works. I'll tell you exactly how all those different compressions are working, because it's a masterclass in compression, the Steve Miller Band stuff is. That is the most compression-happy band you'll ever hear in your life. Everything is so compressed in so many different ways. So I'll hopefully talk about that a lot, as people seem to be super interested in compression. There's Tim Gillies, the noted metal mixer, has said in a number of ways that modern rock and metal mixing topology is all about using different kinds of compression. So it's probably worth doing that one, even if it isn't like for you know, like I'd be listening to Zappa by choice, but there might be more to be learned from the Fly Like an Eagle. And I know somebody kept asking. It's not the first time. Do bug me about the Zappa, though, because that'll be fun when I start doing it. It has to be completely private, though, because Gail Zappa would sue me into next week. Or is she still around? Yeah, there's a lot of darkness in the Zappa family, and it's best to not get too heavy into it. I agree on the Mac Mini. I've been trying to figure out what I needed to do in order to upgrade, and it is going to be a 6-core one. And they are actually, up until the Mac Pro comes out this fall, the top-of-the-line Mac Mini will be the fastest Mac of any kind ever in single-core performance. When they know what they're doing, they know what they're doing. And for the exact thing that I'd be dealing with, because I always have to worry about, like, am I going to design my rig for stuff that I'll never do? Like, am I going to spec out some kind of computer and be like, well, I must have multiple docks for video editing and being able to have terabytes of data that can be removed from the... But I'm not necessarily doing that. So honestly, it seems like it's a pretty good call. And my call on that would simply be getting the fastest one that I can, given that it's not going to be a Mac Pro or even the old 2012 Mac Pro, 2013, whatever. And getting as much of the hard drive stuff because that's built into it. Like one of the things about the T2 chip that they use is that you can do like video encoding using their special chip that's blindingly fast and doesn't use the CPU at all. So to the extent that that can be used for things like streaming and whatever, it starts to become incredibly high performing. But the T2 chip is also apparently what they use to address main memory, as in the SSD. So the part of the deal with the Mac Mini being so fast is like it's going to be like 4 times faster than what my current computer can do as far as accessing what it is basically its hard drive. And you get that when you order the thing, but at the same time, you also don't want to be getting your RAM necessarily from Apple because, like, yeah, I'm sure their RAM is very reliable and they've chosen wisely. But it also comes at an enormous premium. And if you wanted to get like a silly amount of RAM for just maxing out the speed of absolutely everything, no matter how big it is, then you might well want to go to somewhere like OWC, Other World Computing, notable for selling stuff for Macs. And they will sell you kits for RAM for various Macs and kits for ways of taking apart the Mac and installing the thing. Even the ones that you can't really user surface, they'll still try to make it so that you can user surface it. And yeah, but then that's partly because I'm Mac based. Surge and Thunder, interesting. Ahmed, you're so into Joe's Garage. I need to listen to that again. I've always listened to 2 and 3 because I owned those records, but I didn't own Joe's Garage for the longest time. And yeah, gaming laptop or desktop PC. So yeah, that's the thing is like if you're doing anything that is a serviceable gaming rig, you're probably also able to do VCV Rack. And if I get the Mac Mini and have it set up so that it's able to do its thing, I can probably do VCV Rack and stream it and get away with that. And I'm also going to be looking into, there's a Blackmagic thing where it's a outboard thing, but it's not the full video production rig, where you can take an HDMI, run it into that, and then it'll spit out basically a webcam-like output, but it's not like the web presenter does only 720p. And I'm pretty sure that this Blackmagic thing, you can do 1080, and it'll spit just your data stream in there, and then your computer doesn't have to do it, so that takes some of the load off of the computer. And that means you can do anything that is HDMI, including like the camera that I'm talking about. But you could also maybe run out of the Mac Mini as a mirrored screen into the HDMI, have that compressed back into like a webcam-like thing that you can feed to your output, and then basically be doing your VCV Rack, but it's basically just mirroring the display so that you can stream what you're doing and take it in OBS, which I'm currently streaming on right now, and be able to get more into your like VCV Rack live streaming. Let's get together and make a modular situation and do something with modular synth. And I'd be able to do something that was non-trivial, even though I was simultaneously streaming it. So that'd be exciting. VCV Rack only, I've done fairly sophisticated things with it, but it brought my computer to a chug, and I wouldn't have been able to stream it. Pex, you naughty fellow. But there's stuff that would be worth doing. Also, VCV Rack apparently allows you to host VST plugins, and so there is apparently already a way of bringing my stuff into there. It's just not a clean way. And I'd probably be doing better to code for it, but that hasn't happened yet. And if I was using it, then that would be happening more likely. It would eventually be happening. It's kind of like Blender. Like I've noticed the most recent version of Blender, they just revised it in such a way that it's approachable now and it works now and it's still free and open source and all that kind of stuff. So I feel that's the future there. And by the same token, VCV Rack is the same deal. It is a single person's vision project that is an open source project that has gotten traction and is the primary thing. It's almost like the Airwindows library. Like in terms of VST plugins, I don't think there's that many other people who are doing massive libraries of free MIT licensed stuff. And granted, there's a bunch of limitations and there's a bunch of things that I don't do. But it's the same thing with VCV. It's the same thing with Blender. It's like you were stuck with Blender's interface for years because the people who were using it were like, well, but this is how we do it. And then you had no choice otherwise. You just, you took that or you didn't use it at all. And they got it to a point where what they did was brought up to speed where you could approach it and now everybody can use it. And it's an even more compelling use case there. I think VCV Rack is going to become that kind of compelling use case for people who want to do modular synthesizer stuff in the computer and they're PC gamers or they have the new Mac Mini or whatever it is that you need in order to, like, being a Mac user, I have to really go to an extra length in order to get the computer performant to a degree that would rival what any PC gamer can do with their rig because they're just using a computer that is more well suited to some of that stuff. And mine inherently is not really that well suited, but I can get it up to that level if I'm really clever about it. Yeah, my brother would not have any clue about what a sidechain input even is, much less how it could be built. Neither of us know those secrets of VST, and the trouble with commercial plugin programmers is they don't want to tell you their secrets, and so it's like nobody ever comes and tries to help me with any of this stuff. I will work it out when I work it out, and then when I do, I will share it, and then other people will not have to make the struggles that I have made. But until that point, there's very few people who have ever helped me. Sophia Poirier from Destroy Effects helped me a long time ago with some audio unit stuff. And Zaphod from, oh God, my brain is really fried today. My sincere apologies for being so, such a mental brain loser today. You know what Zaphod does? It's that really elaborate convolution thing, the Volterra kernels thing. What's the Volterra kernels thing? It's this whole thing. People get as excited about that as they do about Airwindows, but it's like a polar opposite of stuff. It's a thing where the processing on it is unimaginably heavy and elaborate and grinds computers to a halt, and people just constantly have to render their stuff to freeze files and then mix off of those. And I cannot remember what his project is, but the Volterra kernel Nebula, that's what it was. So Zaphod from the Nebula project is one of the people who helped me out when I was getting the VST things. Without Zaphod helping me and my brother, I probably wouldn't have gotten it done. So some of the people out there, and there's other people out there who are just really cool. Like I think the guy from Valhalla is really cool, although he hasn't specifically helped me with stuff, but he shares ideas and is pretty open about things, and I like him. And Guillaume from Blue Cat updated his stuff to work better with my audio units because they were coded correctly to work with Apple stuff, and his things weren't up to speed with that. So he went to the effort of supporting it really well. So Guillaume from Blue Cat is also extremely awesome. But yeah, maybe I'll hire him to teach me some of these things. That's a guy who knows how to do sidechains and stuff. That's something I totally can make notes of. Like, hire the guy who knows how to do the things, and then literally pay him to tell me some of this stuff that people aren't telling me. Because that's basically how it works. Is like, in some ways, I know how to hear stuff. I know how to make certain kinds of sounds. In other ways, I'm a complete dumb bozo, and I'm just fending for myself as best as I can. And, you get what you pay for, I guess. It's all free. But I will bring that guy to my aid. I will hire him. And it's like the Penny Arcade guy. Oh, God. This very funny thing. I need to keep scrolling, sadly. People talking about trackers and stuff. Yeah, you're right. Game would be able to do it. But yeah, there's a funny thing about Penny Arcade that... I see this other David's. Joku, if ECV rack is bloated beyond your comfort level, don't get into modular synthesis. I have drunk apple cider vinegar, but it's pretty intense stuff. It's like, wow, that's really strong. Bug about OBS and curve. I'm just scrolling. Through. Dum-de-dum. Twitch and VCV rack. Bo, the thing about ULA is that if you put encode and decode directly between each other, it's a bit identical. There is no screwing up unless you're doing stuff between the two halves of ULA. But if you do stuff between the two halves of ULA, it gets crazy real fast. Reaper's own coding language. Yes, I've been poking around with that. I haven't gotten that far. The first thing I want to do with the Reaper stuff is come up with a way of doing that metering that you get on tracks. Like you can do sonograms literally on the tracks, and I can't figure out how to make it either be vertically larger or rearrange it so that it is more logarithmic in shape, so that it renders the same way that my old sonograms from the Evergreen studies were done. It's the same technology. It even looks kind of similar. It's even using kind of similar colors, but it's being done differently in a way that is not useful to replicating what the Evergreens stuff, like the thing that went in the New York Times. The printouts that I made on that were from a program called Amadeus that doesn't even run on Intel Macs. And that's from the dawn of time. And it's extremely cumbersome and impossible for me to do that anymore. And I don't have that technology anymore. But Reaper is doing a very similar thing as one of the options in it right out of the box. So I'm going to be looking into that. It's just one of those things that is very challenging for me to get up to speed with. Muzzle, the Zaphod is spelled Zaphod, which is like Zaphod Beeblebrox from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy stories. Yes, Jack, everybody is always asking me for inputs and output levels. I don't like having too many sliders. It's always been a problem. I have continually been adding more and more of that kind of stuff, and don't always do it. So there's your challenge. There's your challenge. It's like when I come up with the simplest possible plugin, which is like, hey, this is one knob that does the thing. This is my test bench for the thing. Like Spiral, for instance. Spiral doesn't have any controls at all. And logically, everything needs to have the input level and the output level and the wet dry, even though that is included for you in Reaper. Logically, all the plugins literally need to have all those same things, and I'm capable of coding it in such a way that there is no sonic detriment to doing that at all. You can have it so that, like, if it's unity gain, then we skip even the multiply and nothing bad is happening. But it becomes visual clutter. And part of what I do with the plugins, as desperately trying to have everything be approachable, is cutting it down. Like, I'm looking right now at the Airwindows website, and I scroll down trying to find swell, and the next one below that is actually C-strip. And I'm looking at that going, oh God. Treble, mid, bass, low pass, treble, freak, bass, freak, high pass, gate, compression, comp speed, timing lag, output gain. And it's like, the generic plugins are great in some ways in that they can work in really primitive systems where other stuff can't work. And they can be very CPU effective. They can be very efficient as far as the plugin itself is only a few hundred K. But the more sliders I add to everything, the more overwhelming it becomes. And it's like, I'm looking at a big old pile of screen with all these little sliders everywhere. And it's less approachable. But then approachability doesn't mean anything if you must have the input padded, and I'm not making it possible for you to pad it. You'd have to use another plugin. And my stuff is designed to be modular. So the one thing you can't do in a modular situation with Airwindows plugins is if you needed to have a wet dry, it would either have to be built into the DAW, like it is in Reaper, or the plugin has to cover it. As far as input and output gains, that can be done modularly with an additional plugin, like an entirely separate plugin. So it becomes a question of how much of this do you need to have in the plugin itself, and how much of it, like if you need to have it changed that much, could you have it as a gain trim as a separate plugin? And that, because my stuff has always been designed to be used in combinations of multiple plugins rather than having the one do everything. I look at C-strip and I'm like, that is horrible. There's too much going on there. There's just far too much there. And I'm much happier when they're a lot simpler. Oh God, solo effects, that belongs on mixers, not plugins. ULaw doesn't work like console. Bo is bringing up a thing where two different channels with two different instances of ULaw encode behave differently when decoded. Well, you'd be doing ULaw encode and ULaw decode on the same channel. It's not anything like console. Console is able to replace a mix bus. You can't do that with ULaw. It'll just blow up. You don't sum things, separate things, into the decoder. That's not what ULaw is about at all. When they're using it in telephone things, it's very much about, like, here's your telephone, and you do the ULaw encode, and then we send it over hundreds of miles of wire, which are meant to be unity gain and not do anything like bad sound-wise, but it will still generate a bunch of noise. And then you do the ULaw decode, and you're getting the original sound back, even though it might be kind of digitized. But in the course of bringing the original sound back, you're dropping the quiet bits of the sound right down into the threshold of hearing. So it's like a noise control. In fact, literally that is what it is. It is a noise control system. Think like Dolby or DBX. We don't really think of, although, boy, that's an interesting idea, doing a bunch of Dolby encodes, mixing through the mix bus, and then hitting a Dolby decode. I'm not sure anybody's actually done that, nor am I really sure what it would do. It would sure be interesting. I'm far from being able to do anything like that. But the ULaw is in the same category as Dolby or DBX rather than in any console category. It's absolutely not meant for replacing a summing bus. It's way, way too strong. It's a noise reduction system. That's really primarily what it is. Zephyr quickly asks, am I okay using PAFNutty on the main stereo bus? Yes, absolutely. PAFNutty doesn't have to be aggressive. It is, if you feed sine waves into it, you will get differently frequencied sine waves out of it. But it can be made to be real subtle. And if you're liking the kinds of stuff that it does, there's no reason not to. It's Chebyshev harmonics. So that is totally something that you can use on the main stereo bus if you find something that you like that it's doing. That said, it can be a bit of a strange thing, so it might be an aggressive kind of sound to put on the main stereo bus, but all the same, you totally can do it. And if you're making it too aggressive, that's on you. But it can be done with all the smoothness that you could want, or to any degree of subtlety that you need. So yeah, it is. You could call it mastering grade. PAFNutty is. Yeah, trying stuff out with ULAW is going to lead you to a lot of nasty noises, but that's fine. Anything that you do between the two stages of ULAW could lead to extremely aggressive, nasty noises. Go figure. An arpeggiator thing. Arpeggiator is the last thing I'd be able to do. That is tapping into the sophistication of talking to the DAW and getting stuff out of it, like tempo and timing and where you are in the bar and stuff like that. A last minute question, since it is almost to the point where I could either go off and take a nap and wait for my camera to arrive, or make another cup of coffee. And in any case, I can start taking care of myself a little bit more very soon, in 2 minutes, yay. But should you buy a Motu Ultra like MK4 for 3? I don't understand what the question is. And yeah, that's the thing. If I run into classic records that are using that trick, and that's a specific trick, Bo was mentioning that someone tried to do this with an old Dolby system, 3-band compression, encode, decode. You can totally do that, and people have. You can take the Dolby encode and run your background vocals through them for this intensely breathy, treble boosted, 3-band compressed kind of thing with a really striking sound, and then not decode it. And that'll give you a really striking, strong effect. And yeah. People have done that. If I do a Evergreens album where I know that that's what has been done, I'll call it out, because it's totally a thing that you can do. Elohim is mentioning a thing. There's nothing I can say about that right now. I don't give away stuff that will take too long to do, that I'd be manufacturing hype for something that isn't going to happen for 2 weeks is probably about my limit. It's like that old Slate joke of how soon is this crazy, amazing thing going to be? 2 weeks. And then 2 years later, 2 weeks. I don't do that, so stuff that I don't have ready, you're not going to hear about. Do you mean a Motu? Mark of the Unicorn? Motu? I've never heard of a Moto. Programming other types of plugins does certainly interest me. I'm just not necessarily very good at it. I need to have enough of a framework. Like, once I'm actually able to start doing something, I'm all over it and I can do lots of stuff with it. But until I get to that point of being able to start, I'm nowhere. So anytime if I'm looking at another type of plugin, and this is what I'm looking at with VCV Rack. I've been talking about that for years. It's not going anywhere. So there will be a time when we'll all be in synchronization with that. But I've been talking about VCV Rack for years, and have even fooled around with trying to get the basic stuff put together, but I haven't been able to run it very effectively. And I've just not gotten started. And until I get started with the thing, I'm nowhere. Like, I have to actually have it up and running and be able to build the thing that I need to build. At that point, I'm off and running, and who knows how much can happen. But until then, nothing will happen. And that's where I'm at with VCV at the moment, is nothing will happen. I can be as interested as I want, but if I haven't clicked with the thing, nothing will happen. I'll be completely stuck. Nothing, I won't even be able to make the first thing. So there you go. Yeah. Well, I'll say this, David. What I've been using myself is a Motu 16A. If there's a particular Motu interface that you're interested in, I think you could probably do a lot worse. Like, I'm using something much like that. It's not exactly the one you mentioned. I don't know the one that you mentioned, but it would probably suffice. Like, how many channels do you need? And it's kind of like that. Yeah. Alrighty. I don't think the PAF90 does anything like what a Culture Vulture would do, because a Culture Vulture is a hardware device that I think is about saturation. But I do have a bunch of saturation plugins. Before terribly long, I'll have that distortions plugin out, and then you'll be able to swap all the various different ones around, and that'll be a pretty approachable thing, I think. But yeah, so on that note, I think it's time for me to go chill, maybe do some plugin coding or whatever, or just like take the rest of my day a little bit more slowly. And I'll see whether I can't do something fun music-wise tomorrow. Looking forward to that, because again, some of my stuff has been developing nicely, and that is on the one hand stressful, on the other hand delightful. It's always nice to get some better instruments together, and eventually I'll be talking about that stuff, but I'll start out by using it. And yeah, on that note, I think I'm about all set. And yeah, I notice exactly how dark it is in here now. Oh well. Part of that is because this is a rainy day out here in Vermont, and it's a lot darker than it would normally be, for that reason. So yep. But then maybe that's just the vibe of the Monday stream, the question and answer stream. So next time I see you, it might be through all different kinds of cameras and stuff. Wish me luck. I'll still have the original stuff that I'm using right now, so that if everything doesn't work, I won't be unable to stream at all. And we'll see where all this stuff takes me. In any case, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.